Aloha and welcome to this month's episode of Maunalua, Past, Present, and Future, a show here on Ōlelo. This episode will be featuring getting prepared for any disaster, especially now during hurricane season. Our thanks to Livable Hawaii Kai Hui for hosting us. I'm Matt Glei. I'm a facilitator for Hawaii Kai Strong, and we're a volunteer group of Hawaii Kai residents who started getting active in September of 2014. We became involved when I went to a neighborhood board and a person asked the tough question, is Hawaii Kai prepared for a disaster? The answer was no. I became an Eagle Scout 52 years ago, and I've always tried to be better prepared every year. And I'm a Cert instructor and a ham radio operator. My compatriot here is Adele Chong, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Thank you, Matt. I'm Adele Chong. I'm the treasurer right now for Aina Haina Prepared, which is now a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Before I joined that group, I'd had this just vague feeling of discomfort that I wouldn't know what to do if a hurricane was threatening. So when someone came to the Aina Haina Community Association meeting a few years ago and gave a presentation about being prepared and said he wanted to start a group in Aina Haina to help the whole community become better prepared, I eagerly joined in. Matt, can you tell the viewers what we're here for? Why are we taping this show?
Well, we're really here to let people know that organizations like us exist in their communities. Aina Haina and Hawaii Kai aren't the only two communities, but our focus in Hawaii Kai has been to support the efforts when authorities respond to hazards, essentially after a disaster has hit. We're there to help them. It may take them days to get out to where we are because the roads are blocked, etc. So we're going to protect life, property, infrastructure, and humanitarian response to our neighbors.
Well, in Aina Haina, our official mission statement is to prepare the Aina Haina community to respond to and recover from a local emergency. We do this by providing our neighborhood with the most up-to-date training and information. Matt, as you mentioned, we're not the only such organization. Can you tell the viewers where on Oahu
Sure.
there's others?
Actually, there's a map we can show which lists all the various communities that have organizations such as ours. And they start with Aina Haina and Hawaii Kai, but they also wrap around the island, Waimanalo, Kailua, Kaneohe, and so forth, all the way to the North Shore, and Waianae and Ewa Beach. So the answer is there in Manoa, there's a lot of active groups here with many people involved.
Okay, thank you. What are the most likely disasters for which we need to be prepared?
Well, the three most likely are floods, which are pretty common here in Hawaii, hurricanes, and the season, remember, is June 1 to November 30th, but they can literally happen in any month. We're lucky because right now the El Nino is gone, so we won't have a severe year, but remember, it still only takes one to hit us for it to be a problem. Tsunamis, of course, we occasionally get tsunami warnings caused by undersea earthquakes, but there are other things like power outages and pandemics and earthquakes and things like that. Every island has its own issues, like the Big Island has to deal with lava. Luckily, we don't. So how do we become prepared? It's really a three-step process. First, you need to know your risks, where you live, where you work, where you go to school. Number two, make a plan, because when it's hitting is not the time to make a plan. And then build a kit for 14 days minimum. And one of the reasons we say that is because if the harbor is damaged, it may take up to 2 weeks to begin to get new goods into our island. So Adele, can you tell me what your risks are or how you assess the risks?
Well, knowing your risks depends on where you live, where you work, where you go to school. So you need to know if each one of these locations is in a flood zone, a tsunami evacuation zone, or in an area that's more prone to hurricane damage. So step number two is making a plan. How do you make a plan?
Well, I was supposed to cue you, but first is knowing where hurricane shelters or tsunami refuges are and how to get to them. If you look on the maps, you have to realize that not every shelter will be open for a given storm. So one of the ways you do is you check with TV and radio stations, and they'll usually tell you what are the shelters that are going to be opened. How are you going to connect with other family members? You know, if you have family in school and you're at home and such occurs, it's going to be difficult. So you have to have a plan that tells you, here's what we do when we're separated. What do you do if everybody can't get home in time? How do you connect? I'll let you talk a little bit more about disaster plans.
Okay. You need to know the disaster plans for your workplace, for your children's schools, and if you have a family member who lives in a care home or a retirement center,
Right.
you need to know what the disaster plan is for that place.
Sure.
You should also subscribe to hnl.info for alerts. This is an app that you can either download to your smartphone or also use on your computer. I think we'll talk about that a little bit later in the program again. So you mentioned that the third part of planning is to build a kit, a minimum 14-day kit. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. One of the keys here is to be prepared before the disaster strikes. If a hurricane is striking today, that's not the time to put your kit together. So we're going to walk you through what the key items are, and there's documentation, once again, available on a website we'll provide that walks you through this. But a gallon of water per person per day. So it's heavy, but it's also important. You can't assume that the water will never stop. So having containers for water that you can refill is much simpler than going to Costco and buying a whole bunch of water bottles. But it's also very, very important. In that gallon per person, half is for drinking and half is for sanitation and cooking, essentially. Food. I have a kit here which all those things that we'll be describing are in. Will fit into this one 12-gallon container. But food, I have non-perishable food like peanut butter, protein shakes, dried fruits, peanuts. If you have infants, infant formula should be in your kit for sure, and food for any other special needs. Utensils and plates, forks and knives, so you can eat whatever food you have. You don't really want to be eating all that peanut butter with your fingers. A radio, a battery-powered radio. One of the important things that most people don't have in their kit is a wind-up radio, so that you don't need to have batteries for it, and you can literally turn it on and you can listen to all the weather stations and all the local FM and AM stations that do that. These cost anywhere from $15 to $25, and you can find them locally. A flashlight with extra batteries, a cell phone. If you have a cell phone, it's not going to last forever, so those little charger things you can buy or a solar charger is a good add to your kit. A whistle, if you're trapped in your home and you need to call for help, you can only scream and yell for so long, so having a small whistle in there is very, very helpful and uses a lot less energy. You can blow a whistle for days, but you can't yell for long. A dust mask. In disasters, typically a lot of dust and debris is kicked up, so having a couple of dust masks in your kit is very, very handy. Sanitation, moist towelettes, garbage bags, hand sanitizers, toilet paper, baking soda. These kinds of things are things that are very, very handy to have in your kit. People recommend tools. Like if you need to turn off your water at home, what tools should you use? Those are things that can be in the kit or attached to it. A basic toolkit, duct tape. Duct tape is a wonderful add. Important documents and cash. So many people create a go bag, but I have all my important documents and cash in a big Ziploc bag that is waterproof. And so I have everything from my passports to copies of my license, my home insurance, copies of the title to my car, all those things. Because if you leave your house and you now have to prove to somebody, I lost a car, I lost a home, you need to have proof. You can also put this by scanning it into a thumb drive and put the thumb drive in your waterproof bag. I also keep my passports and, as I say, cash in here. And when you put cash in there, use some small bills. Don't just put 20s and bigger in there. If you need to go get a bottle of water or something, if all you have is a 20, the bottle of water is going to cost you $20. So you're much better to have some 1s and 5s. I even have quarters for phones in there. Local area maps is a good idea. I have a small book that literally is every street on Oahu. Most important, medical, prescription medications, spare glasses and contacts if you use them, first aid kit. My medications, I keep 2 weeks of medications in a small kit like this, and I rotate them. So there's always one in my go bag. So I can just grab it and go. Now, I know you have pets, Adele, so why don't you give us a little bit more detail on how you deal with pets during a disaster?
Well, pets need to have their own go bag. They need to have pet food that's in a sealed container and that doesn't need refrigeration if you don't use up the whole thing. Like when I open a can of dog food, it lasts my dog several days. So maybe if you have a big dog, you don't have to worry about that. You feed the whole can at one time. You need extra water for your pets. You need pet medications if your pets are on medications. You need extra collars with ID tags on the collars. And a leash for each dog or pet, just in case you're leaving in such a hurry that you don't have time to make sure that they have their collars on. If you evacuate to a shelter, you will need to have a sturdy crate, not a cardboard crate and not a fabric crate. You need to have a sturdy crate that's large enough for your pet to stand up in and turn around in. And it's preferable to have your pet's photo and name attached to it. And also to have the pet's vaccination records. When I go to have my pets for their routine vet checkups and they get a vaccination, I ask the reception desk to give me a copy of a vaccination record so that I always have the current one and I keep it in the go bag. You also need extra cleaning supplies and newspapers. I think that on the screen we were going to show an evacuation planning for pet owners that's from the City and County's Department of Emergency Management. And it's that list is also on the Hawaiian Humane Society webpage. And just as an aside, I've gone through the Hawaiian Humane Society's emergency shelter training for volunteers so that I know what to do when I evacuate with my pets, and then I can help with sheltering other people's pets at the evacuation.
There are never enough of those volunteers to go around.
Right. So continuing on with the 14-day kit, something else that I would put in the kit is a paper copy of phone numbers, important phone numbers, just in case, we're also dependent on our contact list and our cell phone. But it's important to have it in paper just in case you can't access your cell phone or you drop your cell phone in the floodwater or something like that.
One of the things that's available from Hawaii Emergency Management is a large emergency plan, and on it you would put all those phone numbers. So friends and family, your doctor, your vet, all those kind of numbers here. And they even have a checklist of all the radio stations that are active in the state of Hawaii during emergencies. So it's a very nice feature. It's available online, or you can actually pick up paper copies at some of the preparedness fairs.
And other things that you need to consider to put in your 14-day kit would include feminine hygiene products, personal hygiene items, diapers, incontinence supplies, depending on who's in your family and who might be evacuating with you. In addition to photos of your pets, you should include a photograph of yourself and your family and your friends to help locate each other if you're separated. And then once again, hnl.info to stay informed about emergencies, weather advisories, traffic bulletins, and much more on SMS or an email. We also encourage, when I have visitors to come to visit me from off island, I ask them to download that app to their smartphones while they're here, just so that they can be informed in case there's an emergency.
Makes a lot of sense.
So, Matt, how does somebody make the decision whether they should, if an emergency is threatening, should they shelter in place or should they evacuate? How do they do that?
Well, it's a tough decision. I call it stay or go. It's the most difficult decision because the answer is you should really think about it ahead of time and don't delay. You don't want to wait until the wind is hitting your house to decide, now, do I leave? So you have to decide based on your risk, as you were talking earlier. If your home is really strong, been built since 1978, it's going to be a lot tougher. But if your home is a single wall construction from the 1950s, that's not where you want to shelter in place. So if your home is strong, sheltering in place is a really good option. If the home is vulnerable, then plan to go to a friend or family's house that's stronger, newer, better built. Otherwise, you need to go to a shelter. The problem with going to a shelter is there's not enough shelter space for everybody on this island. So the people who can shelter in place should shelter in place. If you decide to go to a shelter, there's some things you need to remember. First, as I think I mentioned earlier, which ones are going to be open. During Hurricane Lane last year, only Kaiser High School was open in our case. And I believe there was another high school sort of in the Kahala area that was also open. But the difficulty is you need to know how to get there. If there are 3 or 4 in your community, you need to know which one is open so you know where to go. You need to bring your 14-day kit with you because, and if you have a pet, you need to bring their kit with them, which usually isn't quite as big as our kits. But you're only going to be in the shelter for a day or 2. So I'd recommend you throw your 14-day kit in the car, get to the shelter, bring the stuff you need for a day or 2 in the shelter with you because there's not a lot of room in the shelter. What you technically have is about 2 by 5 feet per person. So they don't have bedding, they don't have cots, so you have to be prepared to bring blankets and so forth. If you have a disability or you have access or functional needs, it's going to be a bit more complicated. If somebody's in a wheelchair, you have to bring the wheelchair. You have to deal with all those kinds of issues, and that's really important. When I go into a shelter, I literally bring, each of us, my wife and I, each bring a bucket, and inside this bucket is, a small sleeping bag and the water and enough food for a day or 2 and those kind of things, and I can sit on it. It's a chair when I'm not lying down. So that's actually a very smart idea in terms of going to a shelter, is just assume it's going to be the floor of a gymnasium because that's usually what it is. Also remember that a tsunami refuge, it's not a shelter, it's a parking lot. Usually a parking lot like Cocoa Head District Park, or in the case of Aina Haina, it's Wailupe Community Park. So it's a park. There may be no building, there may be nothing. Essentially, they'll open a gate and let you in. So it's basically a place to hang out for a few hours while the tsunami threat goes away.
Well, Matt, let's talk about what our organizations do when the disaster isn't happening.
Well, we hold public outreach meetings about 4 times a year, February, May, August, and November. And we try to cover hurricanes, tsunamis, floods, earthquakes. Sometimes we teach people how to build a kit, literally, and we're right in front of them. We build that. But we also cover special topics like sea level rise and, as I said, earthquakes. This is all part of the Hawaii Hazard Awareness and Resilience Program, which all these communities that we showed you earlier on the map are using those parts to teach their people how to be prepared, what to expect. So, what do you do in Aina Haina? Because you have a different program.
When there's no disaster happening, we have 4 main things we do. The most visible is an annual emergency East Side Preparedness Fair, which is at Kahala Mall, usually in the springtime.
Yep.
We have about 25 agencies that come and participate and to inform people about emergency preparedness from their perspective. And
Sure.
Hawaii Kai Strong is one of those 25
and,
agencies.
And Manoa and many
Right.
others, yes.
That's right. Other examples are the Honolulu Fire Department, the National Weather Service, the National Guard, insurance agencies.
Coast Guard was there too.
Coast Guard. There's a search and rescue group. There's a lot of different agencies that I was surprised when I found out how many different agencies there are that want to make sure that people are informed.
Right.
The second thing is we've helped provide information to the community during special events at Costco and Hawaii Kai, which you've participated in too. There 3 times in the last 2 years, Costco has asked us to come and set up information tables, and
we get a
with
lot of
things
good questions from people
Yes,
as they
yes.
come by. It's amazing. We set up demos like these too, yes.
The third thing we do is we arrange with special speakers to come and give presentations every other month. We've recently started partnering with the Aina Haina Public Library to use its meeting room for these presentations, which has been very good. For example, recently we've had retrofitting your house for hurricanes and earthquakes, safety measures for cooking after an emergency, sea level rise, tsunamis, hurricane preparedness. We even had one out in the parking lot at the Wailupe Community Park about how to use a fire extinguisher,
Oh, cool.
which people got to actually do that.
Cool.
And then the fourth thing is we encourage people to get additional training from the American Red Cross on first aid, on shelter management, and shelter assistance, psychological first aid, things like that.
So what do we do when a disaster actually happens in our communities?
Well, both Hawaii Kai Strong and Aina Haina Prepared helped to staff the disaster recovery centers after the April 2018 floods, when these recovery centers were established by the city and county, HIEMA, and then FEMA. And our role was just to help people know where the thing was. We had a little table outside with information on it and help them know where they need to go to stand in line and answer questions about what kind of documents they might need so that they could get the help from the agencies they needed. Both of our groups helped to do damage assessment after that flooding event. We walked around damaged neighborhoods to make sure they make the assessment and hand out contact information for various agencies to help in the recovery. And also related to that 2018 flooding, we helped a few families with the initial cleaning of their homes, gathering many volunteers. We had volunteers from across the island. Even some people from Mililani came to help with cleaning equipment, and they had shovels and rubbish bags, and we called that mucking out the homes.
Mucking out,
I mean,
yes.
literally inches of mud in the homes.
Oh, yeah.
Then when the Aina Haina Public Library was ready to reopen, because as you recall, they were really affected by the flooding, we recruited volunteers to come and help unpack all the boxes of books so that they could reopen.
That's amazing.
So Matt, you mentioned Cert at the beginning of this. Can you just tell us a little bit more about Cert?
Sure. We have, each of our communities have small community emergency response teams. That's what CERT stands for. And these are people who have enough training to help after the disaster strikes. So we're not out there during the hurricane, but right after it's over, we're out there trying to help people. And so we assist in search and rescue, basic medical treatment until the first responders can get there. If the island is ever hit by something like a hurricane, the first responders will be totally overwhelmed. So we're going to do the best we can until they can sort of catch up. Free training is available from the city and county of Honolulu. That's the Department of Emergency Management. And it covers briefing on specific disasters. So we walk people through so they understand how these things happen. Utility and fire safety, how to turn off water and power and do those kinds of things. What to do in case of terrorism, or how to deal with the bad effects of dealing with a disaster. People are hurt. Field medical treatment, being able to save someone's life with very, very simple tools. Light search and rescue and fighting small fires. That's 2 days. The third day, we actually do an exercise on Battery Harlow on the side of Diamond Head, and we literally walk people through in a simulated disaster to deal with it. And by the end of the third day, people are much more competent, capable of feeling, having confidence in themselves and being able to deal with a disaster.
So who would go to a CERT training like that?
Well, it can be literally anybody. We've done everything from teenagers, Boy Scout level people, all the way up to people in their 80s in wheelchairs who have gone through the training, and they can contribute significantly. So it's a great course. We also teach in some of the communities, so you don't always have to go to the Frank Fozzie building to learn that. I might mention that both organizations are interested in more volunteers for our planning committees. What kind of volunteers do we need?
Well, in Aina Haina Prepared, we need volunteers to help with the annual preparedness fair. That takes a lot.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, before, during, and after the preparedness fair,
Sure.
and then also to help coordinate the presentations that we have. So our committee meets every month on the second Tuesday of the month in the evening for just an hour.
Right.
And so we always welcome more volunteers to help us with that.
Great. Well, I wanted to say again, mahalo nui loa to Livable Hawaii Kai Hui for hosting us on Ōlelo tonight, and also thanks to the Ōlelo team for your efforts and expertise. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Ta-da. With 1 minute to spare.
Oh.